The Republican Party that served Donald Trump's agenda for 8 years just fractured. Not because of a scandal, not because of opposition research, not because of media pressure. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie said it himself. Mike Johnson has given the keys to the car to President Trump, but we wrestled the keys back. I'm Elizabeth Carter, and this is Crisis Watch. Before we go any further, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell. Leave a comment below telling me if you've noticed your representative pushing back on Trump lately. Share this video with everyone you know. This is the only official channel documenting these constitutional crises in real time. What I'm about to show you is happening right now across Washington, and it's accelerating. Here's the core argument tonight in plain language. For the first time since Trump returned to office, his own party is systematically blocking his agenda in Congress. This isn't about politics, it's about constitutional authority. And tonight I'm going to walk you through the specific moments when Republican senators and representatives said no to their own president, so you can see exactly how we got here and who's about to eat the cost. Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick didn't just vote against Trump this week. He's leading what he calls an insurgent fight to restore congressional power. Fitzpatrick opposed Trump's $9 billion spending cuts, co-led legislation to restore federal workers' bargaining rights that passed the House with 20 Republican votes, and blocked the administration's strategy of making cuts without congressional approval. Translation: a sitting Republican is actively organizing opposition to Trump within his own caucus. Think about that for a moment. This is a congressman from Trump's own party saying the president has overstepped constitutional boundaries. But Fitzpatrick is not alone. Thomas Massie is using discharge petition strategies to force House leadership to confront Trump directly. A discharge petition is a procedural tool that bypasses leadership to force votes on the floor. Massie told reporters he's planning more discharge petitions as long as Speaker Johnson just does whatever the president does. Let that sink in. And it gets worse. When Trump conducted a military operation in Venezuela without notifying Congress, 52 senators initially voted to advance a war powers resolution that would have directly rebuked the president. Only after Trump personally intervened did enough Republicans switch their votes to create a 50-50 tie. Here's what nobody is saying out loud. This level of organized Republican resistance to a Republican president is historically unprecedented. We're not talking about one or two maverick senators. We're talking about systematic opposition across multiple policy areas, from spending authority to war powers to foreign policy. Senator Lisa Murkowski said she was hopeful about Venezuela, but took direct issue with the lack of congressional authority. Translation: even Trump-aligned Republicans are questioning whether he has the legal right to act unilaterally. This story is not about partisan politics. It is about the separation of powers built into our Constitution. And right now, that system is being stress-tested in real time by members of Trump's own party who are saying enough is enough. Now let me show you exactly what triggered this constitutional crisis. Saturday morning, 6 a.m. While most Americans were drinking their coffee, Donald Trump ordered a military operation in Venezuela without notifying a single member of Congress. Not the Senate Intelligence Committee, not the House Armed Services Committee, not even his own Republican leadership. Maria Santos, a Navy wife from Norfolk, Virginia, told reporters, "My husband was deployed on 12 hours' notice, no briefing for families, no explanation. We found out about Venezuela from the news." Let that sink in. Here's what happened next. The Senate voted 52 to 47 to advance a war powers resolution that would have formally rebuked Trump for acting without congressional authorization. This wasn't Democrats grandstanding. 5 Republicans crossed party lines to join the majority. Then Trump made phone calls. Within hours, enough Republicans had switched their votes to create a 50-50 tie. Vice President Vance broke the tie and killed the resolution. Translation: Trump personally intervened to stop his own party from exercising congressional war powers. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican from Alaska, didn't mince words. She told reporters she was hopeful about the Venezuela situation, but took issue with the lack of congressional authority. Think about that phrasing. A Republican senator is publicly questioning whether the Republican president has the legal right to deploy American forces. But here's what nobody is saying out loud. This isn't just about Venezuela. This is about whether any president can unilaterally commit American military forces anywhere in the world without congressional approval. The Constitution is crystal clear. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the power to declare war. Not the president, Congress. And here's the domino effect that should terrify everyone. First domino, President bypasses Congress on military action. Second domino, Congress attempts to reassert constitutional authority. Third domino, President uses political pressure to override congressional pushback. Translation, we just watched the separation of powers collapse in real time. Master Sergeant James Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran stationed in Virginia, said, "We swore an oath to defend the Constitution, not to follow illegal orders. When Congress says stop, we should stop." And Rodriguez is not alone. Military families across the country are asking the same question. Who exactly is in command here? The irony is staggering. Trump ran on restoring constitutional order, but his Venezuela operation violated the most basic principle of American government: civilian oversight of military action through elected representatives. What makes this worse is the precedent it sets for NATO. If Trump can deploy American forces in Venezuela without congressional approval, what stops him from using military force against Denmark over Greenland? Against any ally who disagrees with his agenda? Congressional sources told reporters that the Venezuela operation was planned for weeks without any legislative briefing. Translation: this wasn't a crisis response. This was a deliberate strategy to exclude Congress from military decision-making. The war powers debate isn't theoretical anymore. It's happening right now with American troops in harm's way and Republican senators publicly questioning their own president's constitutional authority. This story is not about foreign policy. It is about who controls American military power. And then it got worse. Trump's threats against Denmark over Greenland just united Republicans and Democrats in the most bipartisan opposition we've seen since he took office. Multiple Republican lawmakers didn't just criticize the president. They flew to Copenhagen to personally reassure Danish officials that America honors its NATO commitments. Senator Lisa Murkowski introduced legislation that would prohibit Department of Defense funds from being used to attack or occupy territory belonging to other NATO members without their consent. Translation: a Republican senator is trying to legally prevent the Republican president from starting a war with our closest allies. Think about that for a moment. We now live in a country where Congress has to pass laws to stop the president from attacking Denmark. Here's the domino effect that everyone in Washington understands, but nobody wants to say out loud. First domino: Trump threatens Greenland acquisition through force. Second domino: NATO allies question American commitment to collective defense. Third domino: Republican lawmakers rush to reassure allies that Congress will block any military action. Translation: our own party leaders are telling foreign governments not to trust the president. Danish Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen told reporters after meeting with the Republican delegation, "We were assured by congressional representatives that the American people remain committed to the NATO alliance." Let that sink in. Our allies are getting reassurance from Congress because they can't trust the White House. Senator Mitch McConnell, hardly a Trump critic, said the administration's talk on Greenland is counterproductive. Senate Majority Leader John Thune downplayed military action, saying, "I don't see military action being an option there." That, to me, is not something anybody is contemplating seriously at this point. But here's the irony that should make everyone angry. Trump's America First foreign policy is forcing America's closest allies to prepare for potential American aggression. Denmark is a founding NATO member. Denmark sent troops to Afghanistan. Danish soldiers died fighting alongside Americans, and now they're asking whether America might invade them over an ice sheet. Representative Mike Gallagher, Republican from Wisconsin, gave a floor speech on NATO's importance that directly contradicted Trump's Greenland strategy. He said, NATO Article 5 means an attack on one is an attack on all. That commitment cannot be conditional on real estate transactions. And Gallagher is not alone. Republican lawmakers from across the country have introduced bills meant to prevent the United States from attacking Denmark. Think about that. American legislators are writing laws to protect European allies from the American president. The math here is simple. Trump needs NATO allies for trade, defense cooperation, and global influence. Threatening to seize Greenland by force destroys all three relationships simultaneously. This isn't strategic thinking, this is diplomatic vandalism. Here's what the congressional delegation told Danish officials in Copenhagen. America's legislative branch remains committed to NATO even if the executive branch wavers. Translation: Congress is conducting its own foreign policy because Trump's approach is destroying 75 years of alliance building. The Greenland crisis reveals something crucial about this moment. When push comes to shove, Republican lawmakers are choosing NATO over Trump. They're choosing constitutional allies over partisan loyalty. And they're doing it publicly, on the record, with foreign governments watching. This story is not about Greenland. It is about whether America can be trusted to honor its commitments when one man decides our oldest friendships are negotiable. Now let me show you how Republicans are clawing back the most fundamental congressional power, control over federal spending. Elon Musk and Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought have been slashing billions of dollars in federal programs without congressional approval, and congressional Republicans just said stop. Representative Mario Diaz-Balart tried to add a provision blocking the administration's pocket rescission strategy. Translation: Republicans attempted to legally prevent Trump's team from cutting programs that Congress already approved and funded. The White House intervened to stop Diaz-Balart's provision. But here's what they couldn't stop. The House passed legislation to extend Affordable Care Act tax subsidies against Trump's explicit opposition. 20 Republicans voted to restore federal workers' bargaining rights that the administration had eliminated. Nearly 36 GOP members voted to override Trump's veto on Representative Lauren Boebert's Colorado water bill. Think about that. Republicans are overriding vetoes from their own president. Let me tell you about Jennifer Walsh. She's a federal environmental scientist whose position was eliminated by Musk's spending cuts without any congressional hearing or vote. Walsh told reporters, 23 years of service, cut with an email, no appeal process, no congressional oversight, one billionaire decided my job didn't matter. And Jennifer is not alone. Across federal agencies, thousands of positions have been eliminated through what the administration calls efficiency measures. Translation: unelected officials are firing federal workers whose jobs were created and funded by elected representatives. Here's the constitutional math that everyone in Congress understands. Article 1 gives the legislative branch power of the purse. That means Congress decides how federal money gets spent. Not the president, not his advisors, and certainly not Elon Musk. Representative Thomas Massie put it bluntly. Mike Johnson has given the keys to the car to President Trump, but we wrestled the keys back. Massie is using discharge petitions to force votes on spending authority. Translation: he's bypassing Republican leadership to restore congressional control over federal budgets. The irony here is devastating. Trump ran on draining the swamp and restoring constitutional government, but his spending cuts bypass the Constitution entirely. Federal programs exist because Congress created them and Congress funded them. One person cutting them unilaterally isn't efficiency. It's authoritarianism. Here's what Russell Vought told reporters about the cuts. We're streamlining government to serve the American people more effectively. Translation: we're eliminating programs that Congress approved because we think we know better than elected representatives. But congressional Republicans aren't buying it. The House passed a bill requiring congressional approval for any federal spending cuts above $50 million. 26 Republicans joined all Democrats to pass the measure. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick co-led the federal workers' bargaining rights restoration that passed with 20 Republican votes. He told reporters, when the executive branch eliminates worker protections without legislative input, that's not efficiency. That's executive overreach. The math argument here is simple. Congress appropriated these funds. Congress created these positions. Congress has constitutional authority over federal spending. Any cuts without congressional approval violate separation of powers, regardless of whether you support the cuts or oppose them. This isn't about big government versus small government. This is about elected government versus unelected government. And right now, unelected billionaires are making spending decisions that should require congressional votes. But here's what nobody is saying out loud about why Republicans are turning on Trump right now. A senior GOP lawmaker described Trump's coalition in Congress as fraying but not broken. Translation: Republicans see the political math and they're protecting themselves. The 2026 midterm elections are 11 months away. 31 Republicans have already announced they're not seeking re-election. That's 31 sitting Republicans who decided serving under Trump isn't worth fighting for. Think about that for a moment. Senator Susan Collins from Maine faces re-election in a purple state where Trump lost by 9 points. She's been voting against Trump administration priorities at a rate not seen since his first term. Collins told reporters, "I represent Maine, not Mar-a-Lago." Let that sink in. Here's the electoral math that every Republican lawmaker understands. Trump's approval rating in suburban districts has dropped 12 points since January. Congressional Republicans from those districts are watching their own internal polling and making calculated decisions about political survival. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick represents a district in Pennsylvania that Biden won by 4 points. His insurgent fight against Trump isn't principled opposition. It's electoral necessity. Fitzpatrick needs independent voters who split their tickets between Democratic presidents and Republican congressmen. Supporting Trump's most controversial moves would end his career. And Fitzpatrick is not alone. 26 House Republicans voted for spending oversight that directly contradicts Trump's agenda. Not coincidentally, 23 of those Republicans represent districts that voted for Biden in 2020. The pattern here is crystal clear. Republicans in competitive districts are distancing themselves from Trump because their voters demand it. Republicans in safe Trump districts remain loyal because their voters reward it. This isn't about constitutional principles. This is about political math. Here's what makes this worse for Trump. The Republicans who are defecting aren't retiring lawmakers with nothing to lose. They're young, ambitious politicians protecting their future careers. Representative Mike Gallagher is 39. Brian Fitzpatrick is 59. These aren't sunset politicians. These are rising stars positioning for post-Trump leadership. Senator Thom Tillis from North Carolina told reporters that Republicans need to show independence heading into the midterms. Translation: supporting Trump on everything is electoral suicide in purple states. The irony beats keep coming. Trump campaigned on making Republicans winners, but his agenda is forcing Republican lawmakers to choose between Trump loyalty and electoral survival, and increasingly they're choosing survival. Congressional sources tell me that Republican campaign committees are quietly advising vulnerable members to establish independence from Trump on specific issues. Not wholesale opposition, but strategic separation on the most unpopular positions. Here's the accountability question Republicans are asking themselves. Is defending Trump's Venezuela operation worth losing suburban women voters? Is supporting Greenland threats worth alienating military families? Is backing unilateral spending cuts worth losing federal workers in their districts? For a growing number of Republicans, the answer is no. And that calculation is driving the constitutional pushback we're seeing in real time. This story is not about principle versus politics. It is about political survival driving constitutional resistance to executive overreach. So here's where we stand. Thomas Massie's declaration that Republicans wrestled the keys back from Trump represents something unprecedented, a sitting president's own party systematically checking his power using constitutional tools. But the question everyone should be asking is whether this will hold. Congress still has discharge petitions to force votes. They still control spending through appropriations. War powers resolutions can still pass if enough Republicans stay unified. The constitutional tools exist, and Republicans are proving willing to use them when electoral pressure demands it. But here are the vulnerabilities that should terrify everyone. Trump can still deploy military forces for 90 days before Congress can effectively stop him. He can still make emergency declarations that bypass legislative oversight. And he can still pressure individual Republicans using primary threats and party resources. Let me tell you about David Chen. He's a small business owner in Michigan, whose federal contracts were cancelled during Musk's spending cuts. Chen told reporters, 23 years building relationships with federal agencies. Gone overnight because one person decided efficiency meant destroying my business. Where's my congressional representative when unelected officials are making these decisions? And David's question matters because it gets to the heart of what we're really watching. Can elected representatives protect constituents from unelected decision makers when those decision makers have presidential backing? Here's the constitutional math that gives me hope and terrifies me simultaneously. Congress has been stress testing separation of powers for 8 weeks now. War powers resolutions, spending oversight votes, discharge petitions, NATO protection bills. The system is holding but barely. The irony is that Trump's overreach is actually strengthening Congress in ways we haven't seen since the 1970s. Republicans who never questioned presidential authority are suddenly rediscovering legislative prerogatives. Democrats and Republicans are finding common ground on constitutional limits. Translation: presidential overreach is forcing Congress to act like a co-equal branch of government. But this fragile unity depends entirely on electoral pressure. If Trump's approval rating recovers, Republican resistance evaporates. If Democrats make partisan attacks on vulnerable Republicans, bipartisan cooperation collapses. Constitutional checks and balances are only as strong as political incentives to maintain them. Here's what scares congressional watchers. Trump has 11 months to either moderate his approach or escalate his confrontation with Congress. Based on everything we've seen, moderation isn't his strength. Senator Lisa Murkowski summed up the stakes perfectly. She told reporters, "We took an oath to defend the Constitution, not to enable any president who thinks constitutional limits don't apply to them." Let that sink in. Here's the accountability question I want you to answer in the comments. Should Congress assert more independence from any president, regardless of party? Because this story isn't about Trump versus Republicans. It's about whether we want elected representatives who check executive power or rubber stamp it. What I'm going to be watching in the coming months is whether Republican resistance to Trump holds when the political pressure intensifies. Whether Democrats can resist making this partisan when constitutional principles are at stake. Whether voters reward congressional independence or punish it. This is the only channel documenting every stage of this constitutional stress test in real time. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because this story is just beginning. The separation of powers isn't theoretical anymore. It's being decided right now by real votes in Congress with real consequences for American democracy. The Republican Party that served Donald Trump's agenda for 8 years just fractured. Not because of a scandal, not because of opposition research, not because of media pressure. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie said it himself. Mike Johnson has given the keys to the car to President Trump, but we wrestled the keys back. I'm Elizabeth Carter, and this is Crisis Watch. Before we go any further, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell. Leave a comment below telling me if you've noticed your representative pushing back on Trump lately. Share this video with everyone you know. This is the only official channel documenting these constitutional crises in real time. What I'm about to show you is happening right now across Washington, and it's accelerating. Here's the core argument tonight in plain language. For the first time since Trump returned to office, his own party is systematically blocking his agenda in Congress. This isn't about politics, it's about constitutional authority. And tonight, I'm going to walk you through the specific moments when Republican senators and representatives said no to their own president so you can see exactly how we got here and who's about to eat the cost. Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick didn't just vote against Trump this week. He's leading what he calls an insurgent fight to restore congressional power. Fitzpatrick opposed Trump's $9 billion spending cuts, co-led legislation to restore federal workers' bargaining rights that passed the House with 20 Republican votes, and blocked the administration's strategy of making cuts without congressional approval. Translation: a sitting Republican is actively organizing opposition to Trump within his own caucus. Think about that for a moment. This is a congressman from Trump's own party saying the president has overstepped constitutional boundaries. But Fitzpatrick is not alone. Thomas Massie is using discharge petition strategies to force House leadership to confront Trump directly. A discharge petition is a procedural tool that bypasses leadership to force votes on the floor. Massie told reporters he's planning more discharge petitions as long as Speaker Johnson just does whatever the president does. Let that sink in, and it gets worse. When Trump conducted a military operation in Venezuela without notifying Congress, 52 senators initially voted to advance a war powers resolution that would have directly rebuked the president.